Treiber. And now, ladies and gentlemen, the time has arrived for Inside Boxing Weekly. So here are your hosts, Mike Goodpaster, John Einreinhofer, and Jeremiah Preisser on the Grueling Truth Sports Network.
Welcome, everybody, to Inside Boxing Weekly on the Grueling Truth Sports Network. I'm your host, Mike Goodpaster. I want to remind everybody real quick that Inside Boxing Weekly is brought to you by Replenishing Care Technologies, the future of sports medicine. You can go on to gruelingtruth.net, click on the banner. It'll take you to them. And also, we are brought to you by Alex Ramos's Retired Boxers Foundation. You can find them on Facebook, so make sure you check them out. My co-host, as always, first up, Jeremiah Preisser. How you doing, Jeremiah?
I am doing real well. Excited for tonight's show. And I also want to thank, there's a fella named, I came across this on the YouTube comments, and I want to give him a shout out because he said he's been listening since 2016. So that's, near the beginning of the show's inception itself.
That's
a fellow named Rock
you,
Liggins. It might be. I think I started in April of 2016. So it's, I don't know. He didn't tell me what month. It doesn't matter. I just want to thank him for listening this long. I mean, we got to appreciate fans like that.
Did he say good things, or was it kind of like the Springer show and he just listened for the cart train wreck?
No. Well, hey, we must keep him coming back for some reason, right?
Hey, doesn't matter what the reason is, but thanks for listening. Next up is the resident Grueling Truth legal counsel, John Einreinhofer. How you doing, John?
Mike, great to be here, guys, and good to hear that we have that long of a long-time listener.
Yeah, and we have a special guest tonight, just recently back from Manchester Arena in the UK. Help me welcome to the show, ring announcer, the best ring announcer in boxing, Thomas Treiber. How you doing, Thomas?
Well, I appreciate those kind words, and just glad to be here, back on the show. Excited.
You need to get one of those hooks, like let's get ready to rumble, because I hear that Buffer, every time somebody says that, he sues him and makes a lot of money.
Well, yeah, that's true. He's got the patent on that, and I'm actually working on that. I have a line I have been saying for the main events, which is the time has arrived. That's kind of become the phrase for me. Yeah, that's kind of become the phrase for me, where I say that just before I go into this is our main event of the evening, and it seems to be getting a little bit of good attention. So I'm going to stick to it and see if that continues to grow and be part of my identity.
Well, see, my problem is sometimes I miss part of the UK fights because they have them during my normal afternoon nap time. So sometimes, I've dozed off. I mean, because I'm getting older, and it gets to be like 4:30 Eastern time. Next thing you know, I'm waking up, and it's the second round. But that does not stop
the time
me.
Zone is weird.
But I just want to let Einreinhofer know that does not stop me from scoring that first round.
Well, it's hard. I probably don't fall asleep just because it's the Facebook stream, and I have to make sure I've got it flowing the whole time.
Well,
so
you need to get one of those Fires or a Roku so you can actually get YouTube on your TV.
Yeah, I probably do need to do that at this point with all that I'm watching. I'm a little behind on my tech.
Yeah, it's kind of archaic not to. Do you ever think about taking a USB or an HDMI and just hooking it up to your TV?
I've been watching it on my iPhone 10, so it's I can carry it out to dinner. I can watch it while out eating dinner and things like that. So I guess it still works for me.
All right, Thomas.
I'm the only guy in the pizza place watching boxing from the UK. At 5 o'clock in the United States.
All right, Thomas, we'll start with you. You were the ring announcer for the entire card, so you saw Nathan Gorman. What's your take on Gorman?
Yes.
Because he's a guy, to me, that he's only 21 years old. He's balding. He's white. He's got a little bit of a gut. He reminds me of himself. So I'm cheering for him from the start there. But he's a guy that really trained by Ricky Hatton. He gives some angles. I mean, he looks like a talented guy that has a chance to turn into something.
Yeah, absolutely. He's a big guy, too. He's about 6'3". He's actually a little bigger when you see him in person. And he's being trained, as you mentioned, by Ricky Hatton. So he's got a great trainer. And I thought, and I've done about 2 or 3 of his fights now, and I thought he looked better than I've ever seen him look. I mean, he really was on his A game. I really liked the way he was utilizing his uppercut, which I think turned out to be the punch that really, really did the most damage to his opponent, Sean Turner. And Sean Turner was a smaller heavyweight, not real tall, maybe in the 5'11" range. But Norman did a great job of utilizing his reach, his movement, and his punches looked to be very strong and effective. So really looking forward to seeing him continue to grow, in addition to Daniel Dubois, another young heavyweight that Frank Warren has part of his roster.
Now, is there any chance that fight could be made sooner rather than later, or is that something you think they're going to kind of let percolate for the next year or two?
Yeah, I mean, I would think they wouldn't put those guys against each other at this stage of the game, but it is certainly a very attractive fight, and I know there's a lot of buzz between people on social media comparing the two. So it sounds kind of inevitable that eventually those two will probably end up facing off. But, right now they're trying to keep those guys busy, get them the experience they need to continue to grow in the heavyweight division. But they both have the right size. They both have the youth behind them. Daniel Dubois is only 20 years old. And as you mentioned, Gorman is only 21. So, man, the future looks bright for those guys.
Yeah, and Jeremiah, I know you were a big Ricky Hatton fan, so was I. And It seems like most of the guys he trains have kind of a similar style, at least with the ability to give the angles and everything. What's your opinion on Gorman?
Yeah. I've actually been following Gorman for a long time. I mean, I've been following Ricky Hatton and all of his stuff, since he retired. I've actually got Ricky Hatton's biography, and I've read that front to cover, and he wrote that himself, and it was pretty well written for, something from a fighter. But I agree. I mean, stylistically, you see that he rubs off on all these guys. I mean, I follow him on Instagram, and he's constantly taking video footage of these guys that he's training. A lot of these guys seem to be relatively inexperienced at this point, but you can see that he's emphasizing body punching. And that was, of course, his specialty. I even brought this to Thomas Treiber's attention, but I had written an article on Ricky Hatton and his body punching prowess a little while back. But yeah, Ricky, I mentioned this when Thomas Treiber was on the first time. I saw him against Jose Luis Castillo in Vegas, and watching Hatton, I own his career DVD set. So obviously he's a guy that I followed pretty closely. But that's one thing that I really admired about him, because it's few and far in between that you notice guys who are dedicated body punchers, and Ricky Hatton was one of the few. I mean, he wasn't like typical body punchers in the sense that, like Miguel Cotto could throw a left hook to the body, or, Mickey Ward was real good at tapping you upstairs and then banging it down to the liver. Hatton was a guy I thought who was innovative in his tactics, in the sense that he would open you up. He would use angles, as we're talking about. He'd use uppercuts and, shift left, shift right. It'd get you out with the left or the right hand. But yeah, I like what I see out of Gorman. And again, it's Hatton's rubbing off on him a little bit. I hope he maintains it. His skills are building, and with the state of the heavyweight division as it is, he'll probably be a contender in relatively little time. I mean, BoxRec, this isn't, they don't have the most comprehensive ratings, but he's already rated number 40. So, he's already well on his way.
All right, John, I'm going to ask you what you think of him, but also, John, real quick, do you think that maybe Jeremiah is a stalker with Ricky Hatton?
I'll just say we tend to know the fighters Jeremiah likes. We'll just leave it at that. And Ricky Hatton would be one of those guys.
If Ricky ever comes up missing, Jeremiah is the first place people are going to look.
Jeremiah doesn't faint much about the guys he likes. So, we don't. But I like Ricky Hatton. I like Ricky Hatton myself. So. Yeah, I mean, with Gorman, I maybe haven't seen quite as much of him as you three guys have, but seeing some, I kind of look at it a little more in general, that I would agree with, some of our British fans. Sometimes I would think they'd be overhyping it. And, of course, Thomas is involved, doing a great job ring announcing over there and seeing some of these guys. And, of course, Gorman most recently. But what I'm getting to is this. There is some truth to the theory that, American heavyweight boxing has dropped off some because some of your better prospects are in other sports, and something that's not talked about, which would be the other sports. And just in general, let's face it, boxing's the toughest sport and the most dangerous, and sometimes you're not going to get some of those big guys willing to do it. While in the UK, I think for the size of the country, there is maybe a little bit more heavyweight depth. And now I look at Gorman as a part of that. Of course, he's one of the younger guys coming up, very young for a heavyweight, just like Dubois. And, good record so far. For me, I'm not down on him yet. I'm not high on him. I do agree that, sometimes if you've just seen more of them like you guys have, I think you can be at a limited number of fights and try to make a projection. For me, I just don't quite have a projection on how I think Gorman's going to come out yet. Dubois, he's shown some flashes, some good things. Again, still only 20. But the British depth, for the size of the UK in the heavyweight division, in a overall still not that strong heavyweight division, the British depth with guys like Gorman, Dubois coming up is really pretty good compared to the rest of the world, where you look at the void of heavyweights in general. And, it'll be interesting to see, I think, for the Brits, because we know for the Brits domestically that when, as you alluded to, when some of these guys do have a showdown, it can be a big seller. And no matter what anybody says, the heavyweight division all over the world, except, maybe in some of the Asian countries, the heavyweight division still drives it. Even if people want to get down on it, it still brings everybody out. It's still what people want to see. So, if you're going to have some British heavyweight matchups that are good, those are potentially big sellers. Myself, and we could talk about it a little more later on, but I like this, Nigerian who's based in the U.S. that PBC showed recently, the Efe Ajagba, the 6'5" Nigerian puncher. He's also young. I think he's 24. He out of those real young guys, I think I like him the best of what I've seen so far, and it's very early for all those guys.
All right. I still like Danny Dubois better than all of them, but me and John Hurley ever disagree, so we'll just let that one go. Then we had Terry Flanagan. Lost in a small upset to Maurice Hooker. What was your take on that one, Thomas? It was a close fight. I think they got the decision right, and it really surprised me that you had one of the judges give it to Hooker 117 to 111.
Yeah, he was definitely watching a different fight. I really don't know where that is possible, but it was definitely Maurice Hooker's night, and I expected it to be a tough fight. It had some great moments, but it was Hooker who ended up getting the nod, rightfully so. And for Flanagan, it was his second bid at becoming a two-weight world champion. He was a former lightweight champion moving up to the super lightweight division, and it just was not meant to be that night. And if you remember, those two were actually supposed to fight in April on a show at O2 Arena in London, which was on a Billy Joe Saunders card against Martin Murray. And so they were ready to go at that time and had to just stay focused and in the gym until this past weekend. So hats off to both of those guys for staying on track and not letting that postponement stop them from fighting again or fighting eventually. And so Maurice Hooker, it looks like he achieved a great goal. I was fortunate to ring announce one or two of his fights on Showbox a few years back. I think it was maybe actually around 2014 and in Memphis. And he achieved a great goal against the odds and fighting in a different country, which is never an easy thing to do. And my hat's off to him and his promoter and managers who was there, Dino Duba. He's signed by Rock Nation. So be interesting to see who he fights next.
Is there any talk of a rematch or anything?
I haven't heard any talks of a rematch. I do know that Flanagan suffered a severe cut from a headbutt down the middle of his forehead. If you saw the fight, it was quite a cut, and it needed 30 stitches. So I don't think he'll be back in the ring anytime real soon, but anything's possible. But I would say Maurice Hooker was, the clear-cut winner, and, I had him winning by around 3 rounds. So in the last round, he definitely won, and he got the job done that night. And I love the reaction. It was all over Twitter when I announced him as the winner, and he, just dropped down in, joy and happiness. And it's always great as a ring announcer to, have those moments.
Yeah, and John, I'm not a fan of either one of these guys. I think they're good fighters. I don't know about calling one of them a champion, but it's still a big accomplishment to go to England and to beat a guy like Flanagan coming from over here.
Yeah, I like the way Thomas summed up that moment, because I thought that was a great ring announcer moment. You had a suspenseful decision, Hooker's fighting on the road, and nobody's sure exactly how that decision was going to come out. And, Hooker was jubilant afterward. That was a good moment. For me, what that fight kind of reflected, I'd seen quite a bit of Hooker, and, kind of one of those guys that came across to you as, not bad, not great. Seeing Flanagan a few years ago, I'm trying to figure out kind of almost what happened with him. Was he not quite as good as we thought, or did he undergo some deterioration? Because one thing I did say on our show, that I always like to refer to that, so anybody thinks I'm going with hindsight, go back, listen to the old shows. I didn't think Flanagan looked good against Petrov. I didn't argue with him getting the decision, but to me, watching that fight, he barely did enough to win that fight. I just thought he was underperforming. He didn't seem to be on the upward trajectory that I thought he might be, and certainly a lot of people in the UK thought he was. He was highly regarded in the lightweight division, highly ranked. He moves up to 140 pounds, and I'm not criticizing this particular fight because we see that all over boxing, but they slap a title belt on it, and all of a sudden it's for a 140-pound title, and, Flanagan hadn't even been fighting at that weight, and he's in the title bout, and he was roughly the equivalent of a 6-1 favorite. So it really was a significant upset that nobody necessarily, I'm not saying I was going in, certainly wasn't picking Maurice Hooker and not going to claim that after the fact, but I did not like the way Flanagan looked against Petrov, and he'd been off for a while. So I'm just wondering kind of, what happened with him and where it goes for him from here.
All right, so Jeremiah, where does Maurice Hooker go from here?
Yeah, I heard this thrown about, but I don't know if there's any validity to it. But I did hear that maybe he'd enter the World Boxing Super Series tournament, with the other 140-pounders. I have no idea, again, if that's authentic. I'm not rubbing elbows with any insiders, so I really don't know. But if he misses the WBSS boat, his options are pretty limited in terms of top flight competition. Maybe that's not a bad thing for him because, as John said, and as I agree with, Hooker doesn't really strike me as a guy who's going to, light up the division. In fact, I'd probably favor every top 10 guy, in transnationals boxing rankings over, Maurice Hooker. But he can, bang out defense after defense. I don't know if, he wants to, do that, try and milk it for what it's worth until the WBSS is over, and then, try and fight the winner. Yeah, it's hard to say. I don't know what Hooker's going to do. There are some options there, but again, there's really not much in terms of top flight opposition. But I did want to congratulate him on a good performance. I mean, it was his height that really did it for him. I mean, he was able to stick with the jab, the long right hands, and Flanagan, he just wasn't moving his head enough. He put the earmuffs on, and he was trying to outspeed him at times. He wasn't, leading with the jab as much as I thought he should have. He didn't look as slick as I thought he could be. And again, it was just Hooker's size, and that was really making the difference there. And, he pulled off a good win.
All right. Next up, we come to what was called the main event. We had Tyson Fury making his comeback after over 2 years out of the ring. Came in at 276 pounds. Fought Seferi and got a stoppage in the 4th round. Thomas, number one, have you ever been in the ring where 2 men have kissed before?
This was a first and hopefully the last. Yeah, that was was an awkward moment, to say the least. I've never seen that one before. But, I think with this situation, you have to kind of look at it from a very broad perspective and realize that, Tyson Fury was mentally ill at one time, and maybe he still is. I'm not sure, but he had to recover from a lot of issues that he was having in his life that sidetracked him from being able to continue and defend the heavyweight world titles. And then he had gained a absorbent amount of weight. So, this is a guy who it was a big hurdle just to get back into a fighting shape, not tip-top shape, but just into a condition where he can get back in the ring and get back in the fight game. And so obviously they weren't looking to get, a really, really tough opponent. But with that said, Sefer, even though he was a true cruiserweight, he did have quite a knockout ratio. I believe it was 21 out of 23 of his fights he had won by knockout. So that's definitely something you never want to take lightly. But the size advantage was very obvious, and Sefer just kept moving around the ring. But, eventually Tyson Fury, started to put together some shots, but, not to the liking of many people. After 4 completed rounds, Sefer's corner advised the referee to, call a halt to the bout. I was hoping to see more rounds with Fury. I think everyone was. And this is just a baby step into getting Tyson back in the ring. You can't expect the guy to look like he did when he fought Klitschko. And it's probably going to take, at least 3 fights or so. And they're going to continue to step up the level of competition. And he's going to continue, hopefully, to get his body back in better shape. And we'll see what's left in the tank. I mean, will he be as good as he once was, or will he never be able to reach that point? We shall see.
So are there any indications on how fast or how slow they're going to move him along here?
Well, I will tell you, it was announced that he's fighting again August 18th, and that's going to be on our Belfast show. And also on that show, August 18th, will be the return of Carl Frampton in separate bouts. So, yeah, I mean, it's supposed to be, moving along rather quickly. They're putting him right back in there. I haven't heard any rumblings as to who he will be fighting, but I'm sure they're going to continue to step it up as Tyson regains his confidence and, gets more rounds in there. So I'm looking forward to seeing him back in the ring on August 18th in Belfast. That'll be on BT Sport as well, and I'm sure that Showtime will be streaming it on their social media as they did this past one.
Yeah, and
well, I was.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to chime in. I was just relieved that Thomas said that Frampton and Fury were going to be in separate bouts in Belfast, because I think Frampton's a more difficult opponent than Zephyr. So,
I agree with that.
But,
yeah, man. That would be an interesting fight.
I think Frampton's too quick for him right now, but hopefully that will change. Jeremiah, what's your take on Tyson Fury? What I saw makes it hard for me to believe he's ever going to get back to where he does, but I hope he does, because you got 3 or 4 guys over in the UK that would be huge draws with him. You got Wilder over here if he doesn't get knocked out by Joshua. What's your take on Fury?
Well, to be honest with you, the bout itself didn't really tell us anything. It didn't say, hey, he's near, what he used to be, or he's far away. Again, the result of the bout is you're still wide open here. But what I can say is I'm happy that he's back. And again, I mentioned this before. Tyson Fury in a drab and relatively dull heavyweight division. Tyson Fury is a character. He can liven it up a bit, and I think he should take the Bryant Jennings safe road back to title contention. I really think that's his best bet. I mean, just keep pounding out, fight after fight, anything that gets you sharper, anything that keeps you in the gym, which I'm really happy to hear that he's going to be fighting soon, because that means he's, maybe he'll take a little time off and then he'll get right back to it. And I think that's the best thing for him. Sorry, here, got a little frog in my throat. But yeah, he's got to take it easy, in my opinion. if I'm Tyson Fury's handler, what I'm going to do is, again, take it easy and wait for Wilder and Joshua to have it out, or Povetkin in Brazil. No, but I want Joshua and Wilder to have it out, and then I just want to get my fighter in a position to take that bout, because especially if Joshua wins and Tyson Fury is good to go, he's near what he used to be, that would be a massive domestic showdown, and that's ultimately got to be the goal. And also, while you're getting that, Tyson Fury he'll be injecting himself into press conferences and just the general atmosphere of the boxing discussion in relation to the heavyweights, and I think that's a good thing. So that's where he's got to go. That's what ultimately a lot of us are hoping for. Good luck to him. But I did want to ask, I did want to talk to Treiber real quickly about one thing. But what was it like paying doing the tributes initially to Brennan Ingle? And what was that like?
It was quite an honor, to be able to do that first and foremost. And, deservedly so, these guys got recognized. Brendan Ingle is a legendary figure in the boxing world. His sons now are continuing his legacy. So I really didn't know I was even doing that until the day of the show, and, had to script that out. And it was, definitely an honor. I have not done a 10-count memorial in the UK before. And with Brendan Ingle, to be able to do that was, a really, really big honor.
Yeah, you did a good job.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, one other thing I wanted to ask Thomas, which I was curious about, because you just don't get the feel in the U.S. on the stream. And, of course, Thomas, you're there doing the ring announcing. What was the crowd's general reaction, besides just cheering, but what was your feeling before and afterward? What was the Manchester crowd's reaction to Tyson Fury? And, of course, these were people that chose to attend, but still, what kind of was their feeling? What are their hopes for him? What do you feel like they're looking for and their general reaction was to him being back?
You know what? I think it's amazing how well received him coming back is. I mean, the fans absolutely love him. And early in his career, I didn't sense that he was getting quite that kind of love. But I think the fact that he's been very open about some of his issues with depression and drugs and things of that nature, I think it's brought him to a real human level, things that, normal 9 to 5 people deal with in their lives. And, Tyson's been very open and honest about it. And he's showing that, hey, I can come back from this. I can get strong and fight again. So I think that's kind of motivating people to be more in his corner and support him, knowing that he went through, a tough time after winning the world titles. So again, in regards to the fight itself, I don't think anybody was expecting it to be, a great fight. And as you alluded to, I really don't think we got to see as much of Tyson to make a great assessment of where he's at right now. But he is working with Ricky Hatton, just like Nathan Gorman. He's been working in Hatton's gym. I've seen some footage of him in the gym, and he's really looking good. I had a chance to talk with him, his father, and in his camp at the hotel. We were in the same hotel for the weekend, and he seems really happy and excited and not putting too much pressure on himself either. I had asked him, I said, Tyson, are you feeling any extra nerves because it's been so long and, a lot of attention on you? And he goes, no, not at all. He said, this is what I've been doing all my life, and I'm just happy to get back doing what I do best. And I think he's ready to show the people that, hey, I can do this. I can come back and recapture those world titles. I think it would be an incredible story. And, he was named after Mike Tyson, strange enough, by his father, who was a former fighter named Gypsy John Fury. And he was a premature child. He was a premature baby. So he wasn't supposed to live. He was named Tyson after Mike Tyson, and he becomes heavyweight champion of the world. What an amazing story. So I think all those different things, I'm not a big fan of the showboating. I don't like to see too much of that when the bell rings. That's one thing I would like to see him cut down on, but, he is a character. And one thing is, though, when he knows it's time to be serious in there, he is. And just can't wait to see him back in the ring August 18th.
All right, Thomas. Thanks for coming on again. I know June 23rd, O'Hara Davies, and on the undercard you got Daniel Dubois against Tom Little, Anthony Yards fighting on that one. You want to tell us a little bit about that card?
Yep.
And then, of course, the June 30th, Belfast, Ireland with Michael Conlon.
Yeah. Next stop is going to be, I leave next week Wednesday. I'll be in London at the O2 Arena for another great night of World Championship Boxing on BT Sport. I think, as many people know, the main event was supposed to be Martin Murray versus Billy Joe Saunders. Unfortunately, Saunders did suffer an injury, so they found a replacement opponent for Murray, and a great undercard. I mean, Anthony Yard, we've talked about him before on previous shows. He looks like a guy to be looking out for. So really excited about that. And then I'll be staying in the UK, in London, and then I'll be traveling straight from there to Belfast, Northern Ireland for the June 30th show at SSE Arena. And yeah, Michael Conlon, big name in Northern Ireland there from Belfast. He's actually signed by Top Rank Boxing and Bob Arum, so they're putting him on Frank Warren's show there. They see the importance of gaining his popularity there in his hometown. So excited to call or ring announce one of his fights. And, August 18th, we're back in Belfast as well. So, and that's going to be Carl Frampton and Tyson Fury. So just super excited to be continuing to work monthly in the UK. The fans are just absolutely amazing. And I really love coming on the show here and sharing my experiences and talking about these great fights out there. And look forward to being with you guys many more times to come.
As do we. And also, both of those cards are going to be on the new ESPN Plus app also, which I'm sure John Einreinhofer is paying $4.99 for.
No comment on the app. But.
You bought the app, didn't you?
I held out. I held firm on the app.
John, you're going to buy the app. You know you are.
We're gonna vote democratically and get those fights off the app. I like Jeremiah put it. We're gonna vote with the wallet.
Cheap people like you can't see them, but I can.
It's principle. It's not the $4.99 a month. It's the principle.
You know what? Do you pay for HBO?
Yes, I do.
And they've shown how many fights this year? And you're paying how much a month?
Yeah, that's a problem. That's a problem.
So why don't you just get rid of
on the edge there?
Get rid of HBO, pick up ESPN Plus.
There you go.
ESPN Plus has got a bunch of rugby too, and I love rugby. I really do too. So don't mock me,
We're
John.
trying not to grow this kind of stuff. If it was down the line with technology where we are already shifted and you're paying $4.99 for ESPN Plus, no big deal. But I hate to do it while ESPN's still around, and then they're trying to hit you up for an additional cost.
Yeah, but is ESPN even going to have boxing on anymore separate from ESPN Plus? I know they did a few weeks ago.
Well, right. And see, and to me, that's what becomes the problem: additional costs.
Well, stop paying for HBO. Get ESPN Plus. You save yourself $7 a month and actually have a fight every month. All right, guys. As always, we want to thank Thomas Treiber for coming on. We are going to take a quick commercial break, and then we'll be back to talk about the rest of the fights from this last week and to preview Errol Spence's next upcoming fight and talk a little bit of boxing news, Triple G, Canelo, and a little Jeff Horn, because we all know that John's a Jeff Horn hater. He just hates him. I don't know why, but we're going to talk to John about that after the break.
I don't hate Jeff Horn. I just call it like I see it.
You're going to have to save it. You hate him. It's all right. At least Jeremiah won't stalk him. He might, though, because I know he likes Jeff Horn. But once again, I want to thank Thomas Treiber for coming on. We'll be back in 42 seconds to talk a little bit more boxing. Replenishing Technologies helps athletes of all levels train, recover, and perform at their absolute best. We do this by offering the PEMF 120, the world's leading pulsed electromagnetic field therapy device. Workouts, injury, and stress cause cells to lose their natural power. PEMF works like a battery charger, helping cells regain the power needed to dump toxins, take in oxygen and nutrients, and repair. 95% of athletes report less pain, increased range of motion, more energy, and they simply feel better after using PEMF 120. If you'd like to count yourself among that group, contact us at www.replenishingtechnologiesinc.com. All right, guys, we're back on the Inside Boxing Weekly Show with myself, Mike Goodpaster, John Einreinhofer, Jeremiah Preisser. Let's go ahead and get into the last week's action. And I think we'll start that off with Jermell Charlo, who won a decision over Austin Trout. The thing that stood out to me, guys, is Austin Trout looked really old going into that fight. And we'll start off with John Einreinhofer. I wasn't real impressed with Jermell Charlo there. I mean, Austin Trout looks almost completely shot, and he had way too much trouble with that guy.
Mike, I actually saw it the same way. I'm shocked. I thought
then be quiet. Trout, There's no reason for you to talk anymore if we agree.
We've all given Trout credit for all the tough fights he's taken. He's arguably fought, and probably not even much argument, he's probably fought tougher competition than anybody in boxing. We give him credit for that, and he's competed and fought well. But I saw the same thing. It was the hourglass was going to run out sooner or later with who he'd been fighting, and I saw some signs of that. He was still in there trying and making it competitive, but he had some trouble. And I agree with you. I saw some of the things in Jermell Charlo that before he got on his knockout run, I was seeing where he had a decent jab, but he has boxing skill, but throws the right hand kind of funny, and he would kind of lull off into dull fights. I saw signs of that Jermell Charlo back, which is not a good thing. And then it was almost like he was trying to will himself out of it. Like you would see him then throw a few more wild right hands than he would normally throw. And in the past and more recently when he was knocking out guys, he was like trying to force it. And I saw then what you saw, Mike. It looked there just more like a Trout that was getting near the end of the line going down. Yeah.
What it looked like to me, John, was he looked good against guys that couldn't take his shot. Austin Trout could, and when Austin Trout showed that he could take the shot, then Charlo reverted back to what Charlo has pretty much always been.
Yeah, there was always going to be that question about Jermell Charlo because he had not been a puncher. Was when he went on this knockout streak, was that in the long run going to be more reflective of who he was in with rather than the trainer change to Derek James giving him more punching power? I'm still not going to write that off because Derek James has done some real good work lately, and we did see that seemingly instant improvement in Jermell Charlo, and he did get the win. He did get a clear win, but he's not the puncher his brother is. And his brother, as time has gone on, has also actually even looked to be the better all-around fighter. So you definitely see more and more separation there between the two. And what PBC in general, despite what we're going to talk about that they have this weekend, really puts more competitive matchups together. Heyman, even though there were some things that may have gone wrong with PBC with the money they spent and the way they wanted to play out, overall, on the whole, they still put together more competitive matchups in the fights we want to see. And what I'm alluding to is I think we're going to get Jarrett Hurd and Jermell Charlo, and I think Jarrett Hurd's going to win that fight. So that's just how I wanted to cap what I see between those two at this point.
Yeah, and don't forget, John, it wasn't clear. It was a majority decision because somebody scored it even. Jeremiah, what's your take? Jeremiah?
Say Ricky Hatton.
Ricky Hatton.
Nope. We may be having some technical difficulties.
Vasil Lomachenko.
We're definitely having technical difficulties.
Yeah, I mean, come on.
Yeah. No, we're definitely
Okay.
having technical
Jeremiah is
difficulties.
having some technical issues right now with his internet, and I think it's really scary. It is going to leave me and you here by ourselves. But we're going to go ahead and we're going to go on to the Abner Mares Leo Santa Cruz fight. To me, I mean, it's an action fight, but I was bored by it. I mean, it looked like the same fight to me. I didn't really see any adjustments from Mares. It's a good fight, but not really that dramatic. Jeremiah, are you back? I thought I heard you breathe heavily.
It's the talk of Mars and Santa Cruz. It's really getting me hot and heavy here. Now it was like a clone of the first fight. You know, it lacked drama because it didn't look like either one of the guys could hurt, you know, the other guy. I mean, there were flurries and there were exchanges, and in a way that's exciting, but it was just too samey feeling, you know, for me to really get into it. I mean, you know, again, I didn't really need the rematch. I said that before. You know, we got it. The fight's over. Santa Cruz is still clearly the best 126-pounder in the world. What I will say is that for one of the first times that I can remember, Santa Cruz actually called somebody out, and he said he wants Gary Russell Jr. Make that fight happen, and I'll be happy.
Yeah, that would be a hell of a fight, I think. Who would you favor in that, John?
That's a hell of a fight, and I like it a lot. And this is why I like PBC, because of their depth, because, you know, they know going in, and I agree with Jeremiah, you don't hear Santa Cruz say that all the time. I'm sure that, and this is a good thing. You know, Al Heyman probably talked to Russell and Santa Cruz, and that's going to happen. So then getting back to your question, I actually did see this fight like you guys did as well. Shocking. We're all agreeing on a few things here. Because of that, I think it was really close before that. I'm going to give Russell a little bit of an edge now, and I have been a fan of both guys. But from what I saw Saturday night, I'm going to give Gary Russell a little bit of an edge. I thought it wasn't even as good of a fight as the first fight. I know a lot of boxing pundits were saying, oh, better fight the second time. I didn't think it was a better fight the second time. I really liked that first fight. I thought Santa Cruz had to really come on in the end of the first fight to get that win. He did that clearly, but, you know, it was a heck of a battle along the way, and Mares started quick. In this one, I do agree with you guys. I saw a lot of missed punches. I didn't think Mares made the adjustments that Robert Garcia probably wanted him to make that you saw him do against Cuellar, who's clearly a lesser fighter. I understand that, and that's what happens a lot of times when a guy's older, and Mares is 32. You know, just can't teach an old dog new tricks kind of a thing when you're in that kind of a competitive situation. And what alarmed me for both guys, even though I liked the fight, I thought it was a good fight. I liked both fighters. I liked the respect they showed afterwards. These are two guys that give it their all. And I've been basically a fan of Leo Santa Cruz's, but I saw a lot of missed punches in this fight by both guys. Didn't you guys? It seemed like you saw it the same way, that there was really like a lot of flailing in this fight. And that's what got me thinking about Santa Cruz and Gary Russell Jr. is I thought the Santa Cruz that fought Frampton in fight 2 has got a good shot at maybe beating Gary Russell Jr. on volume. But this flailing Santa Cruz I saw in this fight against Mares, and I kind of saw that guy in the first Frampton fight. That guy's not beating Gary Russell Jr. He's not beating the Gary Russell Jr. who just beat Joseph Diaz Jr. So a win, a clear win, but not the best Leo Santa Cruz I think I've seen.
Yeah, and I'll tell you, Jeremiah, I hate to agree with John again. This has been
I know.
Me and him agreeing. But I think Gary Russell Jr. beats him too.
Yeah, and I think, you know, he may be. I actually wouldn't pick a favorite at the moment, because I do think if Santa Cruz can stick to a game plan and stay sharp like he did in the second Frampton fight, I think that presents a pretty challenging prospect to Gary Russell Jr., who's the shorter guy. You know, and for me, Gary Russell Jr., as good as he could be, you know, if he stayed active and stayed sharper, you know, his timing would be better. You know, I still think. I don't know, that fight's a toss-up for me, because again, Santa Cruz, if he can stick with the game plan like he did, you know, stay behind the jab, stay behind the ones and twos, I think that's a tough prospect. I'm not quite sure who I would favor there. I mean, I can see it either way. I mean, I can see Gary Russell Jr. with his quicker hands. I just think Gary Russell would probably have to press more if he were going to take that fight, because Santa Cruz, he showed if he wants to. He's not really lighting it up in terms of talent, but with his competition level and the fact that he's emerged victorious in all but one, and that was the first Frampton fight, I think that speaks highly of the guy. And he's a damn good fighter still. Again, I'm not going to call that one. I don't know, but it's a fight we should see. I mean, with Frampton possibly fighting, I've heard the names thrown around. Luke Jackson, the Australian featherweight. It's Gary Russell and Leo Santa Cruz is pretty much the best fight you can make at 126 right now.
All right, next up we had Terrence Crawford with a 9th round stoppage over Jeff Horn. I'm really not interested in what John thinks on this. Jeremiah, what did you think of the fight? Because really, I mean, this is what we expected. I think my prediction was an 8th round knockout. I think we were all about the same thing. But the thing that stood out to me was this. I thought Crawford would dominate him, but I think Terrence Crawford's even better than what I thought he was. I think Terrence Crawford would do this to 9 of the 10 guys in the top 10, and I think he would beat the other one.
Yeah, and I've talked about this before. I mean, at length, in terms of the welterweight division, it's not as strong as people seem to indicate. If Keith Thurman was healthy and he was active and mentally he was into it, then I wouldn't have so much of problem with people saying it's a good division. I saw a guy who I know and knows boxing. He said maybe this is the best welterweight division he's seen since the late 90s, early 2000s, when there was De La Hoya, Mosley, Corte, etc. I just don't buy that. If Thurman was healthy, maybe, because potentially you could have Thurman, Spence, and Crawford undoubtedly all in the pound for pound, and you typically have a damn good division if you have two guys who are considered pound for pounders, such as middleweight. But yeah, you're right. I mean, Terrence Crawford would have beaten the crap out of just about anybody. I mean, you look at you got Spence, you got a clear 1 and 2 in Spence and Crawford, and then you got a Danny Garcia and Sean Porter, and they're squaring off. So then we'll have a stronger indicator of who the number 3 guy is. But Danny Garcia is not really, he's kind of plateaued. Nobody's really in awe of his ability anymore. We know there are chinks in his armor. Sean Porter's lost both of his closest fights. We know there are chinks in his armor. And then you have an old Manny Pacquiao, and then, Ugas and Adames and guys like that. So, again, I don't think it's a strong division. But the thing that particularly impressed me about Terrence Crawford was not his boxing ability. We all knew he could do that, but he seemed to be the better in. Yeah, right. He seemed to push Horn off, especially as the fight wore on. I mean, you would get the sense. I mean, just even if you didn't know much about the two fighters, you're like, hey, Horn has spent his whole career at 147. Crawford is, he started off as a lightweight. Horn would be the bigger, stronger guy, and he would use that to his advantage. But Crawford, to his credit, he was able to push off. He was able to land shots. But that's not to take everything away from Jeff Horn. I mean, he did have a strategy going in. It's just hard to implement it when you're fighting a guy so much better than you. He was you could see that he was strategizing. I mean, he was throwing the straight right hand, and even a few of them landed. And when he was throwing the straight right hand, he was keeping his left hand up to try and block anything that was any return fire that was coming back. He reminds me of Ricky Hatton in the sense that he's got this bounce step, right, where he tries to throw your timing off. So, by bouncing in, almost as a feint, and, he'll get you to react and then he'll pounce. He was using angles, but the disappointing part was, Crawford was the bigger, stronger guy, but Horn wasn't trying to go to the body as much as I thought he could. But Crawford, he looked every bit as good as some people were making him out to be. I mean, his timing, his sense of distance, his speed. He's not a real big puncher for welterweight, but he's obviously got enough power to get a guy's respect. He just looked damn good. I mean, it was a damn good performance from him, and now we got a clear number 1 and number 2 guy. Unfortunately, they're for rival promote. They're on rivals, so I don't know when we're going to get that, but it's an unfortunate aspect of boxing. But the sooner the better.
All fight, John?
Yeah, this one, I'm being consistent when I say this particular one, I saw this coming a long time ago. This was no shock at all to me. I would advocate, a lot of people won't listen, but this would be a perfect example to me of why you want to break things down in 8 divisions, because you've got a lot of unnecessary divisions. To me, when Keith Thurman was still active, clearly the top 3 welterweights, if you were ranking 8 divisions, were Errol Spence, Keith Thurman, and Terrence Crawford. So I believe there was a lot of smoke screen when you talk about Terrence Crawford moving up, and there's a WBO welterweight title on the line, and there's mystery as he's going to take on this bigger guy. That just didn't faze me whatsoever. Didn't faze the odds makers whatsoever, because I think the odds makers understand things like that. That's why Crawford was a huge favorite. There was no mystery to the odds makers. So I think people get caught up in a lot of smoke when they don't break things down properly. And there just wasn't any mystery in this one. This was just a mismatch. I said it before the fight. I've been consistent on it. I think Jeff Horn's got a lot of heart. I just think when we're talking about fighters on this level, he's just not particularly that talented. And, I think he's going to have a lot of trouble picking up another significant win the rest of the way. I thought you could make the case for him, but I don't think he won the Pacquiao fight. He was out on his feet late in the fight, and Pacquiao hadn't knocked somebody out since the Ice Age, and Pacquiao was a 38-year-old guy that started out at flyweight. So I just think that people were looking at a lot of wrong signals here, and this was an easy one. For me, it just played out like I expected.
It was an Australian that thought Jeff Horn was going to win this fight, or even be in this fight.
Yeah, and I agree with you there. Well, I think I agree with you, Mike. Really, I do in that sense that you're right. I don't think outside the Australians, I can't remember seeing anybody actually pick Jeff Horn. But there was all this talk about, can Crawford, handle, quote unquote, stepping up to face this bigger guy. And there was a lot of talk from people who should know better along those lines. But I would concur that I don't think, like, let's say in the U.S., there was really anybody out there then saying Jeff Horn's going to win, but there was all this, he might have, give him trouble and go the distance and things like that. And then, you had some of the overseas people, especially the Australians, doing it even worse. And I just didn't think that there was really any suspense there on this one.
Yeah, but I still think there's no doubt that Jeff Horn should be in the top 10 of the welterweight division, because the division's not very good.
I still think it is, but it's a good discussion that the three of us can have in there.
You made a comment today, though, on social media that this Abdu Korov, which I've seen fight, would knock Jeff Horn out in 2 rounds.
A couple rounds, I think. I don't think. Yeah, I don't have any problem
15-0 with 9
prediction.
knockouts. He's not even that big of a puncher, is he? From the couple times.
He's a huge puncher, and I have no problem making that prediction. Yeah, I think the division is still. He took Minucci out in 1 round, and he's beaten Mikhailov, the Russian. The guy's a huge puncher. Nobody wants to get near him. He's just going to have to, get some promotion and build a name, maybe get over here somehow. But, that's probably what it's going to require for him to somehow secure some big fights. But it's been done before. It may be able to be done. There'll be an enterprising promoter that might cut some deal and realizes, the upside that the guy's got.
Yeah,
but I think the division's still strong. But let me just finish on it. I think that you've got, as Jeremiah points out, I think that recent developments, Thurman has just recently become inactive for a year, which is, and I agree with that standard, a traditional standard to fall out of the rankings. But that's just happened. And Kell Brooks just vacated the division. So you've just had sort of very, very recent losses there of those guys. I still think the division's one of the stronger ones in boxing. Now it's just, as Jeremiah said correctly, I believe, now it's just changed to a Spence Crawford 1-2, and you've got a promotional problem there. Of course, that would be a great matchup. I myself would favor Errol Spence in that matchup. I think my instinct is that Kell Brook is probably better than anybody Terence Crawford has beaten so far. And Terence Crawford's obviously, he's probably going to end up proving to be a great fighter. I'm not taking anything away from him there, but when you get to this really, really very high elite for our super fight type of matchup, then you've got to look at those types of things. And I think that Crawford starting out at lightweight and then taking on somebody like Errol Spence, then some of those factors come into play a little bit more. And I think Brook's probably going to prove to be better than anybody that those two combined have beaten so far. And Spence has beaten him, of course, so by knockout. So that's kind of the way I see the division. But I'm getting, after being pessimistic, I'm all of a sudden today I'm a little bit more optimistic in boxing on some things about when I was about to lose all hope for clear guys at the top of a division, traditional division, and maybe some meaning in lineal titles. There might be a glimmer of hope, and we can talk about that some more later. But somehow Spence Crawford happening would be part of that.
Yeah. But I still don't see how you'd have to use Uzbekistan, who's 15-0 with 9 knockouts. I watched him today against Tawa Kaduku, and it was a unanimous decision. I have a hard time thinking he can get rid of Jeff Horn quicker than what Terence Crawford did. Jeremiah?
Yeah, what am I making the case for?
You're just talking.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I didn't know if I was making the case
There's
for Jeff Horn at the top 10.
Just Jeremiah.
Yeah, well, and that's the thing is, with the state of the welterweight division, we don't need anything else. I mean, we really don't need Spence against the winner of Danny Garcia and Sean Porter. No. We don't need Terence Crawford, taking a title. Who can Terence Crawford on his side of the aisle fight against? I mean, he might be able to fight Aegis Kavialauskis. I mean, that's a possibility, but I don't think Kavialauskis is. I don't think, as much as I like the guy, he's been on, he's sat down with me and talked to me, and he's a nice guy and I like him. He's never going to be on the level of Terence Crawford. I know he's fighting pretty soon, but I don't see any reason we have to delay this. Might as well just get it on. Hopefully, in the process, Keith Thurman gets his stuff together, and I've heard rumors that he may sign with somebody else, maybe Eddie Hearn. That would help take some of the political stuff away, and then he can fight whoever he likes. But they might as well just get the fight on. It's again, there's no reason to delay that sort of thing. And let's just do it.
All right, and unfortunately, about the only thing we got to preview this week is Errol Spence against Oscar Ocampo. This is what we're going to be stuck with till they fight each other, guys. It is not just going to be Oscar Ocampo. It's going to be Jamal James getting his ass handed to him. The guy from Uzbekistan who, I'm sorry, guy from Uzbekistan, if you're listening, but you need to shorten that name up. But this is what we're going to see. We're going to see a bunch of one-sided ass whoopings. Sean Porter, of course, will be able to go in and go to war with both of them and at least be respectable probably. But outside of that, we got to see Spence Carr. I do not want to see Errol Spence and Oscar Ocampo. Well, I watched a little Ocampo today, and the thing that stood out to me is he's fought – the most noteworthy guy I think he might have fought was Jorge Paez Jr. because he's Jorge Paez's son. If you look at the guys he's beat, his last win was against Dario Furman, who was 14-3. I mean, these guys are all – the average record of guys he's beaten is probably 17-6. I mean, there's no way this should be the fight Errol Spence is fighting right now, Jeremiah.
No, of course. I mean, I understand the promotional angle of it. I mean, you want Errol Spence to have a homecoming and market himself.
Lamont Peterson then. Don't give us two. I mean,
right. Why are we having him fight one time a year and we're just now getting on? I mean, for me, it just shows a lack of awareness there. I mean, Errol Spence is a guy that many people are hyped on. I mean, Floyd Mayweather, essentially crowns him the heir apparent, and because of that, verbal knighting, it's a lot of Mayweather's old fans jumped on board, and now you have a lot of American people, behind Spence himself, and you should have been having him fight 2-3 times a year, once or twice in Texas. this whole time before he reached the world level. Now we got to deal with this. But I will say, I mean, it's not all doom and gloom. And the only reason I like this, because at least we're getting Errol Spence fighting more than once a year. And that's got to be looked at as a positive.
Okay, we'll go with that. John?
You got to something.
Yeah, what I'm going to say here is even though they have their moments, I like, even though I like what PBC has done overall with when Al Heyman has acquired the depth, and even if you look at their FS1 cards, more competitive matchups, Showtime generally more competitive matchups. That's the way boxing used to be. That's the way it should be. Fights where you're not certain who's going to win going in. With that said, this fight is top rank-esque. I'm just saying, PBC, you're better than this. Carlos Ocampo has no chance. He's like a -8, something insane, like a -8,500 underdog now, I saw today. And I don't disagree with that, which is almost like we're at the point where nobody's going to even take money on the fight because it's such a mismatch. Ocampo hasn't fought anybody. He doesn't even have a high KO percentage. So, you can't even say like, well, maybe he's got some pop. This fight ends whenever Errol Spence wants it to end. And even though it may, quote unquote, in some ways look bad because you show what a mismatch it is, I think Errol Spence is a guy that has the old-fashioned killer instinct, as they used to call it. It's one of the things I like about him. I hope that he doesn't mess around with this guy and just gets him out of there immediately. I don't want anything like we saw last week, with Tyson Fury and Zephyr. You're serving up a mismatch we don't need. Errol Spence, I'm a believer in the guy completely. I think he's the number one welterweight in the world. Even with Crawford there, I favor him over Crawford. I think the guy's for real. I have for a long time, as you guys know. I say I don't like this anyway. I'm not going to justify it because the fighters don't at the top level don't fight enough nowadays like they did in the past, even 35 years ago. And what I mean by that is if Errol Spence was going to fight 4 or 5 times this year and he wanted to fight Ocampo and Frisco, Texas as the homecoming, we might get a laugh 35 years ago.
The problem
Hope
we got,
nobody
John,
gets seriously
is
injured
this.
and fight.
You've got Garcia and Porter going to fight in August. So my guess is Spence might fight the winner of that, which means he's probably not fighting until next year again.
And that's the same problem I have. My blueprint for Errol Spence for the year, if they were going to do this type of thing with Peterson, and then Ocampo is worse than I would have thought they've done, frankly. But this type of a plan, that's what you said, Mike. You finish the year with a Porter Garcia winner, and we'll say, all right, 3 fights in the year. That's why I picked him for fighter of the year going into the year. It's close to that. I think it could and should happen. I'm not saying it's going. I think, like you said, the Porter Garcia is going to happen too late in the year. That may get held off, and I think that's a shame. I wanted him to have the 3rd fight this year, being a significant, true top 10, not fringe of the top 10 type opponent like a Lamont Peterson, but a real solid top 10
You don't have a
guy.
3rd fight this year now.
I don't rule that out either. I think that would be a big disappointment, but not impossible. And that's why I don't like the Ocampo thing because, it's not like we've just got it set where he's fighting the Garcia-Porter winner in December or somebody else that they maybe were creative with and is more formidable. We just don't have that set. Like Jeremiah talked about with the Terrence Crawford, this is the top rank kind of nonsense. Terrence Crawford, Bob Arum, I said yesterday or today, he'll be on regular ESPN on October 25th. The point, they don't even say who he's fighting. That's how bad it is. I mean, what happened to where you announce the fight because it's going to be a competitive fight we want to see? The idea is 2 guys who we want to see fight. Instead of Terrence Crawford will be making an appearance on October 25th. You know how bad that's going to be right there. They won't even say who the opponent's going to be. So Ocampo is that kind of a guy for Spence. I will talk about when we talk about paying for boxing fans have to pay too much, especially in the U.S. And this is why I'd always go against fights like this. I'm not paying premium cable, my Showtime bill every month for Spence-Ocampos. I'm not paying. I mean, I'm already locked in, but the point is they've had good fights this year, good cards, we know that. But premium cable, you're supposed to get that. I'm not paying. I shouldn't have to pay for Spence-Ocampos.
No, you shouldn't. Nobody.
No, they shouldn't even charge people for tickets.
This is like, Sugar Ray Leonard defended his title against Larry Bonds on HBO, but in between, I mean, he was also fighting Hearns and Duran. So
right.
You give him Larry Bonds, you give him Bruce Finch.
Right.
But he fought Hearns and Duran. This guy fought Kell Brook and struggled for part of that fight. I really want to see how good he is. Right now, I lean towards Crawford just because I've seen more of him, I think. And I think the fight is generally a toss-up. I lean towards Crawford just because I haven't seen Spence as much, and I haven't seen him against guys. At least Crawford was fighting guys that were, at least, most of them were legitimate top 10 contenders when he defended his title. But what I see Spence fights like once a year. My worry is the kind of skill that he has, I don't think is conducive to just fighting once a year or even twice a year. I think to stay at his best, he needs to fight 3 times a year.
Well, isn't it amazing how that simple concept seems to go over the heads of so many modern fighters? I mean, it's, the more you fight, the sharper you are. And this is why, it's not as if we're all exhibiting some, nostalgia from years for, boxers of the past, but it's just a dyed-in-the-wool fact that the more you fight, the better you're going to be. I mean, it's one thing to spar, consistently, that's the closest thing you're going to get to a fight, but actually fighting, seeing different styles, the preparation is different. I mean, these guys, what they do is they'll get out of shape, right? And I'm not sure maybe Errol Spence stays in good shape year-round, but what you see from a lot of modern fighters is they get out of shape, they take a long vacation, and, they're just kind of lounging around until it's training camp time, and, they're messing themselves up. I mean, they're shortening their years. Again, they're not as good as they could be. They're not realizing their potential. And I mean, even if Errol Spence was fighting 3 times, just even if he was going the old Golovkin route, if he couldn't get Terrence Crawford for a while, and that's very well possible because of the political alliances.
At least fight somebody decent.
Exactly. I mean, fight who will ever fight you. If just keep throwing offers out there. I mean, whoever takes it, takes it. Just keep pounding out defense after defense. Build the fight, build yourself, and everybody would be happy. But instead,
and this may be crazy, John, but if he doesn't have a Porter or any of them to fight for, why not fight Jeff Horn? Take him out quicker than what Terrence Crawford did. Build more interest in the fight, because you may not think much of Horn, but I guarantee you'd rather see Errol Spence against Jeff Horn than you would Carlos Ocampo.
Ironically, Mike, I do think that's what's going to happen to Horn, but I don't think it'll be on the PBC side of the divide. That's all. But I do think that's where it ends up for Jeff Horn, is that somebody who is really good is going to see his name and offer him enough money and take him out quick. But I think, we want Spence in against, PBC has some depth. Let's face it again. Why not have Errol Spence get a little more competition? When you think about it, this certainly wouldn't have been impossible. And forget the alphabets. Some listener out there, we're glad you're out there, but might be saying, but he's the IBF mandatory. These promoters can ignore those and cut deals with the alphabets whenever they want. If they didn't want Spence to fight, and it's all of them, not just PBC and Al Heyman's guys. It's all of them, Top Rank, etc. If they didn't want Carlos Ocampo, there would be a deal cut for the IBF, and he wouldn't have to fight Carlos Ocampo. And secondly, we know Carlos Ocampo has no business being anyone's number one contender, any organization that exists on the face of the earth. So forget that argument. In other words, you could be fighting. Ugas said he wanted to fight. Matter of fact, Jeremiah makes a good point, because I think that was sincere, and he's with PBC. He said after his, hey, in this era, at least he's fighting semi-names. He knocked out Ray Robinson, the new Ray Robinson.
He said, give me Spence. There is no new Ray Robinson, by the way. I watched that.
Right, but it's just that, I'm not saying Ugas is going to beat Errol Spence. Of course I'd pick Errol Spence. But, Yordanis Ugas is a guy that deserves a big fight and comes to fight and has talent.
It would be competitive.
Right, it'd be competitive. Give me Jamal James is very tall for a welterweight. He has skills. PBC's got him. We know better. It doesn't have to be Carlos Ocampo, and it's just not acceptable.
Yeah, well, and there are other options for him too. I mean, could also fight. I had it, and now I forgot it. But it was. I wouldn't even be surprised if the PBC, just to keep him busy. We're forgetting that Andre Berto and Devon Alexander are fighting one another.
I would like to say this. I did not forget
undercard.
that. I didn't forget that for 1 second in my defense. Go ahead.
Yeah, so I wouldn't be surprised at all, if this whole Crawford Spence things takes far too long to get done, and in the process you have fights like that. But I do have an idea. It just kind of came to me, but I do have an idea who Terrence Crawford may fight. I remember him and Jose Benavidez Jr. They had some a verbal exchange that wasn't too kind. I think before Terrence Crawford's last fight, and so that very well may be his first defense.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd bet you that's probably going to be his next fight.
Yeah.
So what we're saying is Crawford and Spence need to fight each other. Probably.
Exactly.
A best of 9 series would probably be the best option here.
Yeah, no matter how the first fight turns out, they might as well just
fight at least a minimum of 5 times over the next 3 years, so we get something to watch. Of course, we got Joshua and Wilder may be fighting. They may not. We'll find out. There's no use to even talk about that until we know one way or the other. Triple G.
Well, there's one thing I did since you mentioned that, though. Well, I'm sorry to jump in there, Mike, but those actually all tie in with what I was going to talk about on those subjects. So let me just jump in for 1 second. I think that this is where I was getting pessimistic. Boxing's easy to get pessimistic about when you love the sport and you follow it a long time, when you see certain things happening. And I was feeling that way about, gosh, are we ever going to have any kind of semblance of a champ per division and in the traditional divisions? And just when I was about to give up, I think there's been just developments in the last few days that have given me a touch of optimism, and it all kind of ties in together for me. And first is the Joshua Wilder. The latest rumor that seems to have some credibility is possibility of a 2-fight deal. First one in the UK where there's actually a little less money available because of site fees, and then a second fight in the U.S. so all the parties can be happy. I don't have a problem with that. Not a bad solution. Let's say it happens. They're clearly the 1 and 2 heavyweights. I think then I get to what Jeremiah said before, which is I thought maybe just in Fury's monetary interest, it might be good if he went right after Joshua, even though I think he would get stopped and it wouldn't be that competitive. But since Wilder and Joshua may go at it, and they're the clear 1 and 2 now since Fury was away with the problems, if Fury's going to rebuild back slow, we've got Joshua and Wilder, the 1 and 2 guys, going at each other twice, hopefully keeping us entertained for, maybe 8 months or so. That gives Fury, who was the last guy to hold the linear title before that, some time to rebuild if he wants to, and then take on the winner, whoever, right, if he can, but even just for the money, who survives those 2 fights, which might be the biggest money fight for the winner of those 2. And then you'd have everything tied up with linear championships, 1 and 2 in the heavyweight division. I like that. I think some people are going to disagree, but sometimes in life this happens once in a while. I think that the Canelo-Golovkin situation actually, when the dust settled, ended up working out fair for all parties. And I think there's going to be a legit argument that can be for the vacant lineal middleweight title on September 15th. That's the way I'm leaning. And I think that's good for everybody. So I'm feeling a little bit optimistic tonight for those reasons.
So if you fail a PED test, you should be able to fight for the lineal title a few months later. That's the complete opposite of what you used to think.
No, and here's my rationale on that, but it is good to flesh it out because it does have to be explained. My thinking of why that all worked out well was because, again, whatever you think about it, and I agree with the Nevada strict liability standard. I think Canelo should have been stripped. I think he should have been dropped out of the ratings. I think it's a better policy. But there's also no dispute in the science of the testing that he was within the limits for
No, there
tainted
is
meat.
dispute.
Is,
the test was taking
no,
Mike.
There's no
Okay.
dispute
The hair
on that.
follicle
There's
test,
no
is
dispute
that
on
what you're
that.
talking about?
No, I'm talking about the actual test that he took
Okay.
in preparation
Well, fuck it.
for the
Hey,
Golovkin
you
fight.
know what?
That
He did nothing
they didn't
wrong.
pass.
That's fine. He gets to fight. Golovkin got screwed out of some money earlier. He trained for a couple months. He's got to take 42%, even though he is the middleweight champion of the world. And he did get screwed over, and the fight didn't take place because of Canelo. But you're right. It's completely fair that Canelo gets 58% of the money.
Now, Golovkin's getting a huge payday. That's probably above his market value. He got a bigger payday after the first fight got canceled, so he got that there. Canelo, because there is some doubt there, you're talking about a strict liability standard, not an actual, fault standard, that he, this way he's out for 6 months. He obviously lost money because he had to give more money to Golovkin in the renegotiations. He lost the fight. He lost the payday. Golovkin did get the Matarosian fight on HBO, so he picked up some money. Golovkin has never been the lineal middleweight champion of the world. I think that he needs that for his legacy, in my opinion. And I think that it just works out well for all parties, I think, under these particular facts. Once in a while that happens.
I think it's an absolute fucking joke. I mean, you're going to reward a guy this is the thing, John. The hair follicle test, they waited for a month to do it. And then they didn't tell anybody about it. And a hair follicle test after a month is not accurate. But, Jeremiah?
Well, I think it all depends, it depends on what happens within that time frame. I mean, if, there's been rumors swirling about that Daniel Jacobs might fight Sergey Deverenchenko. I'm not exactly sure what Billy Joe Saunders is trying to do. If he's playing the waiting game to try and collect a big cash out here late. I don't know what he's doing with his career, to be honest with you. But Billy Joe Saunders and Jacobs, they're considered two of the top middleweights as well. And again, I think if, for instance, you have Daniel Jacobs fights Sergey Deverenchenko, as I noted just a second ago, if Jacobs beats Deverenchenko, I would have a hard time seeing the rationale for putting Canelo Alvarez number 2, given what Jacobs has done as of late. I mean, Silsuki, or however you pronounce his last name, damn good fighter. Deverenchenko is obviously in everybody's top 10. So it depends on what happens in that time frame. But I would like to see more discussion on this, and I understand both of your sides here. It would be nice to see Golovkin fight for the lineal heavyweight championship or middleweight championship of the world, because a lot of Golovkin fans want to see his legacy more justified. For him to be labeled the man. But again, I mean, would that be the right thing to do? I mean, again, I'd like to see more discussion on that. I'm going to wait and see, if, what Jacobs does, what Saunders do, because, they both can make the case for them being number 2 in the middleweight division. But I'm glad it's signed. I mean, we'll get it out of the way. We'll see what happens. We'll have months of the promotion.
Is Canelo that big of a pay-per-view draw?
He's the biggest in boxing. He's not on the level of a big pay-per-view.
Yeah, but is he worth 58%? I mean, he's a guy that has never sold a pay-per-view at more than $1.5 million. The only time he did is when he fought Mayweather, and we know it's because he was fighting Mayweather. It's not like he's a huge pay-per-view draw. The Cesar Chavez Jr.
He did a little bit over $1 million for Chavez Jr.
Yeah, and that was because the Mexicans wanted to see Julio Cesar Chavez's son.
But it's just the way it is now, Mike. I mean, it's pay-per-view boxing, and Jeremiah, I think you agree too, Mike. I mean, I'm glad it's dying out. So, but Canelo's kind of the last stand of a guy who can draw enough from a pay-per-view.
He can't draw it with himself. I mean, Manny Pacquiao used to be able to draw it fighting guys that weren't that good. Floyd Mayweather could. The only way that Canelo's going to have Canelo against Daniel Jacobs is not a pay-per-view fight. If it is, it's not
Yeah, I
going to
don't think
sell.
it would do that way.
Yeah, it's not going to sell 1 million. There's nobody else Canelo can fight at this division. In this division, this is a pay-per-view fight. The only fighter that brings him pay-per-view numbers is Golovkin. They're on an equal plane.
He can. The thing is, Mike, they're not, because Golovkin tried pay-per-view against Lemieux and he sold 150,000.
Yep.
You know, he just can't. He can't do it.
Canelo didn't try it against a guy like that, did he?
No, but Canelo would do more than that. Canelo can do just enough with what the prices are for pay-per-view nowadays, that if they want to put him on there on his own, they can make money. That's what the other guys can't do. And certainly Canelo is no Mayweather as a pay-per-view draw, I agree, but he's the only guy at this point that, you know, can at least carry a pay-per-view by himself and make it profitable. Nobody else can, and that's what he could have done against Jacobs. Would it have been a huge seller? No, it wouldn't have been a huge seller. But on Mexican
Canelo
Independence Day, he could have done that.
Was that Callum Smith or Liam Smith? Was that pay-per-view?
Yeah, that did about 350,000.
Okay, so by himself, he did 350,000.
Well, against the absolute no-name, non-competitive
and who
opponent,
was
he did
Golovkin's pay-per-view against?
Lemieux.
Okay, pretty much the same damn thing. And he sold 150,000. Neither one of them.
It's a 200,000 difference. You know, it's you know, you do the math. It's enough of a money difference.
It's enough of a money difference to
know,
make a 58-42 difference.
Yeah, it is.
Really. There's nobody that Canelo could sell 500,000 pay-per-views against outside of Golovkin. They barely did 1 million together before. And on top of that, Canelo's done nothing
nobody
to make himself bigger.
He did 1 million against Chavez. Chavez wasn't fighting well. You know, he was certainly on a downswing. Hadn't been doing anything.
But the point is,
you know,
at least half of those people bought it to see Chavez's son.
Yeah, but there are things they can do to get creative. As Jeremiah mentioned, and I agree, a few weeks ago, I was thinking the same thing. You know, that they might, I'm not saying they were going to do it this September, but this is the thing. Golovkin's getting older, and you got to get the money, you know, while you're in it. You know, you got Munguia's out there now. He's going to be a star. You know, he's in Canelo's weight neighborhood. You know, big possible fight that they can sell on the horizon. You know, they can get a little more creative, and you know, Canelo can do enough. You know, the Golovkin's team did a good job negotiating, getting him more money. A credible report today said that Golovkin could make $40 million on this fight. So, you know, if the guy's going to get a $40 million payday when he sold 150,000 for Lemieux, that's a
Canelo
good job.
sold 300,000, and he's going to get what, 60 million? So that's not bad for a guy that can only sell 300,000.
He's certainly going to get paid well. No argument about it. I wish, frankly, we would be beyond pay-per-view, even though this is a fight that is probably the biggest fight that can be made in boxing. You know, Joshua and Wilder may be the only other argument. You know, but you wish boxing could just get away from pay-per-view at this point. But at least these are fights where it's a little more, quote, worthy of pay-per-view than what we were getting fed. So you give it a bit of a pass. But it'd be better if I think boxing just got away from the pay-per-view model.
All right, Jeremiah, so we don't leave you out.
Yeah, I'm not, you know, I think all the bullets have been spent on this. Yeah, well, I mean, the fight sign, it's going to happen. I mean, the thing is that Canelo is a bigger sell. I mean, initially Golovkin was going to accept a 65-35 deal, and, you know, because of Alvarez's messing up, you know, now he got 42, and now he's got an extra five-ish million to go in his pocket, and, you know, that's a good thing. Kudos to him, and kudos to Tom Loeffler for getting that. But, you know, I guess we'll just wait for the promotions and, you know, wait till the fight happens. You know, I think a lot of people have touched on this, though. I think a lot of us are skeptical whether or not this does the same amount of bias as the first one. I'm not particularly convinced, but we'll see.
I think it could.
I agree. I think that's the one mystery. I'm not. Yeah, I agree. I think that's the one mystery, and I haven't made my final call on that. I don't know if this does better because of the controversy, like Mike said, or I've been looked at a lot of times like Jeremiah. Over the years, I've learned that sometimes you think a second fight's going to be bigger for one reason or another, and it just isn't. It actually draws less. I don't know on this one. I gotta think about it and get a little bit of a feel, but
plus,
I do find that's one of the interesting things.
I also think that it gets hurt because of the first decision. It was so bad, Jeremiah. Jeremiah.
See, Jeremiah can't call that decision bad.
It was bad. Anybody calls it bad.
Nah.
Yeah, sorry.
Go ahead, Jeremiah.
Okay, yeah, no. I mean, part of it is, I think it's a combination of a number of things, is that a lot of people are just kind of spent on the whole thing. I mean, if you're a Golovkin fan, it just feels like he's been playing too many political games with Golden Boy and Canelo, and it's just kind of taken him away from what he used to be. I mean, he used to just go out there, 3-4 times a year, bang out guy after guy, and then you would say, hey, when's he going to get a shot at the man, and Cotto's paying him step aside money, Alvarez and Golden Boy, they're bogging him down in negotiations and all this other stuff, It just a lot of people, I think, and I've noticed this. I even saw this on Douglas Fisher's feed on Twitter, is that a lot of people just seem to be kind of spent by the whole thing. It felt exhaustive. We've got this controversy and this, and the negotiations have been so heavily publicized that, a lot of people are just like, especially fans who just don't really care that much about the money because, we're not really getting a cut of the pie, so, we're not at the table, we're not rubbing elbows with the promoters and, trying to negotiate percentages and whatnot. It just, again, it feels exhaustive. And a lot of people are just kind of like, let's just get on with this, and, as a Golovkin fan myself, it just feels like Golovkin has kind of been taken out of character because of this whole thing. I mean, I'm glad that he's going to get a big payday, but I also miss the old Golovkin in the sense that, again, he would go out there and fight 3-4 times a year. He'd fight guys that were, underwhelming at times, but at least he was staying active, and it was what he wanted to do, and it was part of the building process of the promotion. And not only that, they were willing to travel. I mean, I remember they were going to Monaco, once a year. They're certainly willing to travel to Japan to fight Murata, or willing to go to the UK and fight Billy Joe Saunders. I mean, that's part of what that's part of the appeal of Golovkin. And this whole Canelo thing, again, it just feels played out. But the fight is here. I don't want to comment much about the percentages and whatnot. Let's just get the fight going, and then we'll see who the better man is.
I think that, myself, I think the draw the first time was fair. I thought Canelo won at 115, 113. I don't think a draw was an outrage. And I think that, hey, Canelo had to draw with Golovkin. That's the only quote-unquote blemish on his record. Daniel Jacobs didn't have a draw, even though it was a close fight. I feel a lot of people that have been fans of Golovkin have apprehension about what might happen in this fight. And hey, that's competitive boxing. You got to ride it out. If your guy's at risk, that's the way it goes.
So wait a second.
Marco Antonio, not fighting Marco Antonio Rubio here, not fighting Curtis Stevens, fighting Canelo Alvarez, and that's a lot of the difference. That's really what the difference is. So
Canelo is so good.
Buckle down
Buckle
down and get ready for it.
Well, all I know is this. Alexander Povetkin didn't get to fight Deontay Wilder, and you said he shouldn't.
Right.
Oh, my God. I mean, you said he didn't deserve it because he tested positive for PEDs. But now you're going to act like PEDs. No, what I'm tired of is this. I'm tired of Oscar De La Hoya and Canelo, jerking everybody around instead of just fighting. I mean, I don't buy this thing.
Povetkin didn't take a suspension, and Canelo Alvarez got a suspension.
Oh yeah, he got a suspension.
Lost a significant amount of money there.
No, he didn't.
And Povetkin went on to.
If he's getting it in September.
And Povetkin, he just gave Golovkin more in negotiations that he didn't fight on May 5th.
Yeah, because he had to.
He lost money
because he's a coward who had to cheat. His whole career has been based on that. I mean, you can look at the size on him. You can talk to the people that have fought him. This is bullshit. This is an Oscar De La Hoya special. I mean, when you look at his career, I mean, I can tell you this. I thought Arizona Laura beat him or at least got a draw. I think when he fought Floyd Mayweather, he showed that he's not a great fighter because Mayweather shuts him out. But, of course, it's a majority decision because this is the thing, and this is what worries Triple G fans. This shit is bought and paid for. The officials are bought. The referee is bought. And this is all just a fucking joke. Because it's what it looks like to me. He's been jerked around for 2 or 3 years by this guy, while Canelo's not even defending the middleweight title for a year or two. He just, and Triple G just keeps fighting, and he's fighting better competition than freaking Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. or freaking Liam Smith. So don't give me that shit that there's apprehension. I have no apprehension because I know Gennady Golovkin is a fucking fighter when it comes down to it. I don't know that about Canelo. I've never seen that in Canelo. What I saw was Canelo hung with him and won the majority of the first 6 rounds. And he ran after that.
Does Mike sound like a guy that doesn't have apprehension to you, listeners?
No, I don't.
That's my exhibit
what
A
I have
of,
is
the,
this.
of the apprehensive,
what I'm tired
of the
is
apprehensive
this.
Golovkin fan.
See, you
that's
interrupted me, and that was
exhibit
all right.
A of the apprehensive
you can do whatever the fuck you
Golovkin
want.
fan.
You're just like Canelo and Oscar De La Hoya. You do whatever you want. Just go ahead and if I try to interrupt you, you just talk louder. Because that's apprehension. Because you're trying to convince yourself your guy can win because you know you saw him lose. 90% of the public saw him lose, and he's going to get knocked the fuck out this time. Jeremiah?
Good. We got a prediction out of Mike already. That's good. He's got to stay with it now. That's the key.
I've stayed with that prediction for fucking 4 years. There's no way Canelo beats him. I mean, even if Triple G gets old. Well, this is the thing. If he doesn't knock out Canelo, he's not going to win because he's not going to be allowed. Jeremiah?
That's the apprehension.
That's not apprehension. That's just the way it is. There is a pretty much standard corruption with at least one judge in every Canelo fight ever. I believe Jeremiah wrote an article about that, and I know you call it horseshit, but anytime you could get him winning 6 rounds against Floyd Mayweather Jr., there's something wrong with that. I mean, when you look at this, the Laura fight, I think they had somebody score at 118 to 108. There's a history of this shit. And nobody will do anything about it. And there's nothing that can be done about it because there's too many people that'll just don't give a shit. All right, now try it, Jeremiah.
Yeah. Well, I don't know what you guys want me to say here. I mean, I'm not going to make any official predictions right now, or talk about the percentage.
Something, so me and John quit fighting. Go ahead.
All right. Well, I guess I'll act as Mills Lane here and just tell you guys to break it up. But
no, he used to say, "Let's get it on."
Well, yeah, he did. Yeah, well, he was breaking him up during the fight too. I miss Mills Lane. He was good. He was actually a pretty good ref. A far cry from some of the guys we've got nowadays. But yeah, I mean, I think that in the first fight, and I know we've talked about this a little bit, Mike. I think Golovkin was a little nervous. He was a bit tense in the early going. He looked as if, and I attribute some of this to age. It's when you have a guy who's 35 years old and he's got 400 plus fights under his belt, amateur and professional total. There comes a time when it's a bit harder to pull the trigger. Again, I'm not saying that he's old and washed up, but he, in my opinion, he can't be the same guy that he was a few years ago. Your physical prime is just, it's not at 34. It's not at 35.
Mine's
it's not at
49.
36.
And I think John is in his 50s, and he's in his physical prime because he won a race about a month ago.
Would your wife agree, Mike?
Race Saturday morning.
See? And he'll
would your wife agree?
Sure,
Mike?
it's because everybody else that runs in his division is dead, and he's the only one. But he's still going to come in first, and that's all that freaking matters.
I beat people just by being out there. That's the way I like to look at it.
Yeah. It's like the 90-year-old that wins the Senior Olympics in the 89 to 100 division, and he's the only guy there. It doesn't matter. The fact that he's still alive means he's the winner. Jeremiah, did you have some smart-ass comment to make? Because I thought you were trying to.
No. I just wanted to ask your wife if you were in your physical prime.
Well, if she was here, I would let you ask her. But I am. The next time I'm doing something with her, we'll call you during it, and you can hear it. All right, John, you got any final comments?
that might silence me, babe. No, nothing can though. So I could maybe make one final comment anyway. But no, just maybe I guess for boxing's sake, I think I really are not sure, but I'd like to see the Canelo Triple G rematch. Gain some momentum in the general public, but we're going to see over the next 3 months. But I think we had a long show, but that was good to cover everything. So I actually think I've pretty much got everything covered I wanted to cover tonight.
All right, Jeremiah, you good?
Yeah, just real quickly.
Oh, hell, I want to say something real quickly. Go ahead,
hey, man,
Jeremiah.
just take it
John
easy.
John goes on forever, and you're always real quickly. Is that something we need to ask your wife about?
Yeah, maybe go ahead. I mean, it's this is for making babies. That's all. No,
quick baby, microwave baby.
That's right. Hey, that's a good thing about being a guy. We always get ours. But anyways, Josh Kelly, the welterweight prospect out of the UK, he's fighting this weekend, and so is the flyweight who I spotlighted in my prospect watch, Artem Dalakian. No, that's Josh Taylor. Josh Taylor's
I got my Josh's mixed up.
Yeah. Kelly's he's more of a slickster. He kind of has that I don't want to say Nicolina Lochi thing, but he's very apt with his head movement. He's receptive. He's got a nice defensive radar. He looks good. He lacks some pop, but I'm seeing he's fighting for the Commonwealth title, so he's making a step up, and I'll be watching that. And same with Artem Dalakian.
All right, guys, we're going to go ahead and wrap it up for tonight. We'll be back next week. I don't think we're going to do a special after the Errol Spence-Carlos Ocampo fight, so you can get with us next week. We have next Monday, we got an NFL Legends show with former Buffalo Bills All-Pro running back Joe Cribbs. Tomorrow at 2:30, we'll have former Alabama offensive lineman, won 2 national championships, Underbear Bryant. Bill Searcy will be on the show to talk about his book, High Tide. Also tomorrow at 10, you've heard us talk about replenishing care technologies. Make sure you hear our show with them about the PEMF machine. It is actually something really, if you got some injuries or you're a little bit sore and, you're like John Einreinhofer and you're an old runner, you could always use something to improve your body. Remember, you can hear all of our shows on iHeartRadio, iTunes, TuneIn, Spreaker, Stitcher. Wherever you find sports podcasts, you'll find The Grueling Truth. So for Thomas Treiber, which was like a week ago, wasn't it? Jeremiah Preisser, John Einreinhofer.
Thomas is back in the UK right now. Thomas already just landed in the UK.
You've been listening to The Grueling Truth, where the legends speak.